He rushed his son to the hospital, desperate to save him, but one blood test exposed a secret his wife had hidden for 6 years. The morning started like any other, with laughter echoing from the kitchen and the soft clinking of spoons in cereal bowls. Charles watched his 5-year-old son, Jaden, munch happily on cornflakes while humming his favorite cartoon tune. Sandra moved around the kitchen, packing lunchboxes and humming along. Then it happened. Jaden's spoon slipped from his hand. His smile vanished. He swayed in his chair, and before Charles could reach him, the boy collapsed onto the tiled floor. "Sandra, call the driver," Charles shouted, already lifting Jaden in his arms. His little body felt warm, too warm. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. Sandra screamed behind him, but Charles was already out the door. At St. Mary's Hospital, everything moved in chaos. Nurses rushed toward them the moment Charles barged into the emergency unit. "He just collapsed," Charles explained, barely able to hold himself together. "He was fine, he was just eating." Dr. Lisa, a young but focused physician, examined the boy quickly. "We need to run tests immediately. His temperature is dangerously high. Please wait outside." Charles refused to sit. He paced, his fists clenched and unclenched. The hallway felt colder than usual, even though sweat pooled on his back. Sandra sat quietly with her hands folded, whispering silent prayers under her breath. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The doctor finally emerged, holding a clipboard tightly. "We've run preliminary tests. Your son has hemolytic anemia," she said softly, "and he'll need a blood transfusion as soon as possible." The doctor paused. "Unfortunately, our blood bank is currently out of his group type. We'll have to rely on direct donations from family first." Charles stood immediately. "Take mine. Use whatever you need." Dr. Lisa nodded. "We'll test your blood now." Charles rolled up his sleeve on the spot. A nurse collected his sample. He didn't sit. He didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on the door that separated him from his son. 30 minutes later, the doctor returned. "Mr. Obinna." She hesitated. "You're not a match." "What?" "Your blood group O. Jaden is group B. That's not compatible for transfusion." Sandra stood from her seat. "Then use mine," she said. The doctor nodded. "We'll draw your sample now." Charles's heart pounded louder than the wall clock behind him. When Dr. Lisa returned the second time, her voice was softer. "I'm sorry, you're group A. Still not a match." Charles turned to her, confused. "But that doesn't make sense. If I'm O and she's A, how can our son be B?" "It happens sometimes. Rare blood types can skip generations," she offered. "We'll test close relatives next." "Do you have siblings who can be contacted urgently?" Sandra stuttered. "My sister lives in Port Harcourt. His cousin is in Dubai." "Then we'll source from the National Bank," the doctor said. "He'll be stable for now. But we have to act fast." The moment she left, Charles sat down slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't look at Sandra. His mind was racing, but his heart refused to follow. Later that evening, Charles stood in the hospital chapel, watching a single candle flicker in front of the altar. He wasn't a deeply religious man, but tonight he needed silence more than explanation. He remembered Jaden's first steps, the way he clung to his leg during thunderstorms, the way he'd say, "Daddy, hug me tight, tight." Those memories felt too real, too deep to be shaken by one blood report. Still, something wasn't adding up. "I won't assume anything," he muttered to himself. "Jaden is my son. He has to be." But a part of him, the part that had been betrayed before in business and life, whispered, "What if?" No. He shook his head. His job now was to get that boy the blood he needed. Everything else could wait. He spent the whole day calling everyone he knew, friends, business partners, even distant cousins. He offered to pay double, triple, anything to get a matching donor. The blood bank eventually came through with a match late in the evening. The transfusion began that night. Charles sat beside his son the entire time, holding his tiny hand, whispering stories of airplanes and superheroes. Sandra sat at the foot of the bed, silent, eyes swollen from crying. 2 days later, Jaden opened his eyes, weak but smiling. "Daddy," he croaked, "I'm hungry." Charles laughed for the first time in days. "You'll eat everything, I promise." Jaden was safe, and for Charles, that was all that mattered. Or so he thought. Back at home that night, while Sandra slept, Charles couldn't stop staring at the blood report the doctor had printed earlier. He looked at the blood group combinations. Something didn't make sense. He opened his laptop and searched, "Can two parents with blood type A and O produce a child with type B?" The answer was no. A coldness swept over him. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to accuse Sandra without proof. But he needed the truth. So quietly, without telling her, Charles called a private diagnostic lab. He booked a DNA paternity test. They told him the results would arrive in 3 days. 3 days later, at 10:02 p.m., the result landed in his inbox. Charles sat in his study, staring at the subject line, "Confidential, paternity result, Charles Obinna and Jaden Obinna." He rested his hand on the mouse. His chest tightened. Ronva the email read, "Confidential, paternity result, Charles Obinna and Jaden Obinna. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion, Charles Obinna is not the biological father of Jaden Obinna." His hands dropped from the keyboard. Silence wrapped around him like a noose. He stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the street lamps casting pale orange glows on wet pavement. Inside, everything had changed. Jaden, the boy he had raised, bathed, protected, wasn't his. And worse, if the timeline was what he feared, then Sandra had gotten pregnant for another man while they were dating, maybe even after. His chest tightened. He clenched his jaw and took one deep breath, the kind a man takes before confronting everything he thought he understood. The next morning, Sandra noticed the distance immediately. He didn't touch his breakfast. He barely spoke. His eyes refused to meet hers. When she reached for his hand, he pulled back. "Charles, what's going on?" He said nothing, just stood and walked away. That evening, when Jaden was asleep, Sandra found him sitting alone on the balcony, staring into the night sky. "I need to know what's wrong," she said, stepping beside him. He didn't look at her. "When were you going to tell me?" Sandra froze. "Tell you what?" He turned to her now, voice sharp and dry. "That I'm not Jaden's father." Her breath caught. "I did a DNA test. After the blood group confusion, I had to. I needed the truth." He stood now, facing her. "And now I have it." Tears pooled instantly in her eyes. "When did it happen, Sandra?" He interrupted. "When exactly did you cheat on me? Was it while we were dating? Or was it after we got married?" Her head shook quickly. No, I didn't cheat. Don't lie to me now. Don't insult me again. I didn't cheat on you, Charles." He stepped back, fists clenched at his sides. "Then how do you explain it?" He folded his arms, waiting. I was seeing someone before you. His name was Victor. We had just broken up when I met you. I didn't know I was pregnant." Charles stared at her, emotion frozen on his face. She continued, voice shaking. "I found out after we started dating. I was scared. My mother told me to keep quiet. She said no man would marry a woman carrying another man's child. She said you were a good man, kind, stable, everything Victor wasn't. So you used me." He said quietly, "You let me fall in love with a lie." "No, Charles, please. I fell in love with you too. Truly. I wanted to tell you so many times, but every time I tried, I was afraid you'd walk away. You should have given me the choice." "I know." He turned his back to her, running a hand over his face. 6 years, Sandra," he said. 6 years. I looked at that boy and saw myself. I called him my son. I gave him my name, my everything. "I'm sorry," she said. "Sorry won't erase what you did," he said, turning back. "You didn't just lie. You built an entire life on that lie. You let me carry a title I never earned, and you never corrected it." "I didn't mean to hurt you," Sandra said softly. "But you did, and you didn't stop it. You watched me love a child who isn't mine, and called yourself honest." Sandra covered her face with both hands. "I was just trying to protect us. I didn't know how to undo it." He shook his head slowly, as though trying to wake up from a nightmare. "And now," he asked, "is there anything else I don't know? Are you still talking to Victor?" "No, I haven't seen him since before the wedding. I swear on everything, Charles." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the hallway. "Where are you going?" she called. "To sleep somewhere I can breathe," he said without turning back. That night, Charles didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of Jaden's bed, watching the boy's chest rise and fall. The child slept peacefully, unaware that the man beside him was no longer sure of anything. "I still love you," Charles whispered, "but I don't know how to live with this." Jaden stirred slightly, then reached out and grabbed his father's finger. Charles felt a tear slide down his cheek. Everything inside him was broken, but somehow Jaden still felt like his. He kissed the boy's forehead softly, then he stood and walked away. The days that followed moved like slow waves. Charles had moved into the guest room and barely spoke to Sandra, except when necessary. Their home, once warm with laughter and routine, now felt like a museum, silent, heavy, filled with things nobody wanted to touch. Sandra tried multiple times to explain herself again, but Charles wouldn't let her. Not yet. He wasn't ready to hear more, not while the wound was still fresh. He continued caring for Jaden, school runs, bedtime stories, morning routines, but something in his touch had changed, softer, sadder, like he was holding on to something he already knew he was losing. One evening, Charles sat in his car long after parking it in the compound. He stared at the steering wheel, his mind tangled. There was one person he had not faced yet, one man who existed behind every question, Victor. Who was this man Sandra had been with? Did he know? Did he care? Was he looking for the child, or had he vanished like a ghost? That night, after putting Jaden to bed, Charles walked into the living room where Sandra sat folding clothes. He stood there, quiet, until she looked up. "Victor," he said. "What does he do?" She blinked. "What? You told me his name," Charles replied calmly. "But who is he? What kind of man is he? Where did he live? What does he do for work? Does he even know he has a son?" Sandra sat frozen for a moment, then slowly placed the clothes down. "He used to be a tailor, worked somewhere in Mushin." Charles' gaze didn't leave her face. "And he doesn't know about Jaden?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "I never told him. After my mother forced me to cut things off, I didn't even pick his calls. I didn't know I was pregnant until months after. You were dating him and me at the same time." "No," she said quickly. "We had just broken up when I met you. But I found out I was pregnant during our courtship, and I panicked." Without another word, Charles left the room and returned to his study. He didn't sleep that night. He spent hours searching online but could not find anything. It took nearly a week for Charles to find anything useful. With only a first name and a scattered memory of what Sandra had told him, he used to sew clothes in Mushin. Charles searched through local listings, old social media posts, and roadside referrals until he found it. Victor Tailoring Services, a small worn-out kiosk near a junction lined with spare part sellers and pepper stalls. The sun was hot when Charles arrived. The air smelled of engine oil and fried snacks. Men hammered metal sheets under tarpaulin sheds. Children ran barefoot between the buildings. Inside a wooden shop shaded by a crooked mango tree, a man sat hunched over an old sewing machine. His shirt was faded, his hands were rough, but his face, it carried something familiar. The same curve in the jaw, the same focus in the eyes. Charles stepped forward and spoke calmly. "Victor?" The man paused, lifting his head with a cautious look. "Yes? Can I help you?" "My name is Charles. I'd like a few minutes. It's about someone you once knew. Her name is Sandra." Victor leaned back slightly, his brows tightening. "Sandra? Nwachukwu." Charles gave a single nod. Victor looked away for a second, then back. "It's been a long time. We dated about 7 years ago. It ended badly." "What's this about? Did you know she was pregnant when it ended?" Victor looked up sharply. "Pregnant? Yes, with your child." For a full 10 seconds, Victor didn't move. Then he whispered, No, that's not possible." Charles placed a photo on the table, Jaden on his 4th birthday, holding a cake with messy icing. Victor stared at it. "My God," he whispered. "You didn't know?" Victor shook his head, his voice hoarse. "No, I swear I didn't. She never told me." Charles studied his face. If Victor was acting, he was doing a good job. "I raised him," Charles said. "From the day he was born until now. He's 6. Victor ran a hand down his face. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just needed to know if you knew." Victor looked at him, eyes glassy. "What happens now?" Charles sighed. "I'm still figuring that out." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victor asked quietly, "Is he okay? The boy? He was sick recently. That's how all of this came out. He needed blood. None of us matched." Victor looked down at the photo again. "He looks beautiful." Charles nodded slowly. "He is." Victor's gaze stayed on the floor. "I'm married now. We have 3 children. My wife sells provisions down the street. We live in a 1-room apartment in Ejigbo. Things are hard, really hard. I'm a tailor," Victor continued, "but the business is slow. Machines break down. Customers argue over small money. I barely get by." He looked up now. and for the first time, Charles saw something genuine in his eyes. Sorrow, not shame. "That boy, your boy," Victor said, pointing faintly in the air. "He has a future. I can see it in that photo. He's healthy. He's happy. He has clean clothes, bright eyes. You've raised him well." "I did what I thought a father should do," Charles said. "And you're still doing it," Victor added. "If I show up now, what will I offer him? Confusion? Poverty? I can't be the man he needs. Not now. You still have a right to know him." Victor's hands tightened around the edge of the stool. "Maybe, but I won't destroy the little stability I've managed to build just to say I'm your real father. My wife, if she finds out about this, she might never forgive me. She's been through too much already." Charles nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "If you ever need help," Victor added, his voice raw, "if Jaden ever gets sick again, or needs something I can give, call me. But don't tell him about me. Not yet." He paused before finishing. "Just let him grow up whole." Charles studied the man for a few more seconds, then gave a single nod. Without saying goodbye, he turned and walked away, leaving Victor staring at the ground, the sound of the sewing machine long forgotten. That night, Charles stood at the doorway of Jaden's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, arranging crayons by color, humming a song under his breath. Sandra walked in behind him and paused when she saw Charles watching. Charles didn't say a word about the meeting. He simply turned, walked into the living room, and sat on the couch with his head in his hands. In that moment, the truth felt heavier than ever, not because it was wrong, but because it was final. 2 weeks had passed since Charles left Victor's workshop in Mushin, and yet the words still echoed in his mind. "He has a future. You're already giving it to him. Let him grow up whole." He had quietly stepped aside, not out of cowardice, but out of reluctant wisdom. His face, though worn from hardship, had carried something Charles recognized: love restrained by circumstance. Victor didn't want to lose his marriage. He didn't want to bring shame into his fragile home. And most of all, he didn't want to ruin the life his son was already living, a life he knew he could never provide. And so he walked away. Charles sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, holding a sealed envelope. He had printed out the photo of Jaden, the same one he'd shown Victor, and placed it inside along with a short note. He wrote, "Jaden, I met someone once who gave you life, but he knew he couldn't give you more than that. So he stepped back, not because he didn't care, but because he believed you already had everything you needed. I hope that someday, when the time is right, you'll read this and understand that fatherhood is not just about blood. It's about who stayed, who fought, who showed up every day, and I'm proud to say that was me, Dad." He slid the letter into a drawer, not to be touched for years. That evening, he returned home from work earlier than usual. The compound felt warmer than it had in weeks. Jaden's laughter floated out from the backyard where he was playing with sticks and toy soldiers, building his own tiny kingdom in the dirt. Sandra stood in the kitchen, silently chopping vegetables. She didn't speak when Charles entered, but her eyes met his. Charles placed his car key on the counter and took a long breath. "I saw Victor," he said. She lowered her knife slowly. "You did. He's married, 3 kids, still struggling. He didn't know anything about Jaden until I told him." Her lips pressed together. "What did he say?" "He said the boy already has a father, and he doesn't want to destroy what's already working." She placed the knife down gently and wiped her hands. "I never stopped fearing that day would come." Charles stepped closer, voice steady. "He's not coming back, Sandra." She looked up at him, confusion flickering across her face. "He gave up his right," Charles continued, "and in doing so, he gave me clarity." Sandra's voice cracked softly. "What clarity?" "That I'm still angry," he said. "But I love that boy too much to let this wreck him. So I'm staying, for him. And for me," she asked. Charles didn't answer right away. He looked past her, through the kitchen window, where Jaden was now holding a stick like a microphone, singing loudly to invisible fans. "I haven't decided," he said. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. "Thank you, for being honest." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "If you want to fix this, don't fight for me. Fight to become the kind of woman who would never lie again, to anyone." Sandra didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. That night, Charles read Jaden his favorite bedtime story, the one about the lion who got lost and found his way back by following the sound of his mother's voice. When he closed the book, Jaden yawned and curled against his arm. "Daddy," he mumbled, half asleep, "will you be here tomorrow?" Charles kissed the top of his head. Tomorrow, and every day after that. Jaden smiled without opening his eyes. You're the best dad in the world. Charles held him a little tighter, and in that moment he knew the truth. Blood had nothing to do with it. If you enjoyed this story, please share it with someone who might need to see it today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story like this one. Thanks for watching Tales by Clara, where every story leaves a mark on the heart. Until next time, stay blessed.